Welcome to the weekly discussion of how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. This is the Fill in the Blank podcast, and I'm Ross Strader, joined by my co-host Keith Abels. And you can follow us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to know that you're listening and what you think about the Fill in the Blank podcast. Hey Keith, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Man, I'm doing great. Well, we survived the 20th episode, and now we're onward and upward, aren't we?
Episode 21. It's all downhill from here, my friend.
We did. Didn't somebody send us an email say congratulations on the 20th episode?
We did. So we got an email that said, I didn't even know this podcast existed, which, welcome to the club. There's a lot of people that don't know our podcast exists.
Right.
This came from Brian. And so, Brian, thanks for listening. We appreciate you sending us an email. And now that you know our show exists, we hope you listen from week to week.
And if I'm not mistaken, Brian's not the only one that discovered this podcast. So we talked last week, we gave an update about international listeners, but you did not include the Spotify international listeners on that. So you've got an update for us.
I do. So the way that the service that we use to distribute our show has two different ways that it distributes it. So it does it through its own distribution platform, and we use a service called Libsyn, or Liberated Syndication. And because we use that service, we also get our podcast released on Spotify, which normally is a little harder to get your show released on it. So it's pretty cool that Libsyn does that for us. But in order to see the stats, it's actually broken out into a separate place altogether. So last week we mentioned that Fill in the Blank is listened to in 12 countries. And I'm happy to say it's actually 17 countries when you include the countries that listen via Spotify. So the countries that we didn't talk about last week were Spain, Brazil, Norway, the Philippines, and Argentina. So welcome to listeners in those countries via Spotify. And Spotify also, we also have listeners via Spotify in the U.S., Mexico, Canada, Japan, and the U.K. And we mentioned those last week as just part of our normal international listenership. So the Fill in the Blank podcast is officially up to 17 countries.
Man, that's a big deal.
It's a very big deal.
Well, we got to add 5 more countries on our worldwide Fill in the Blank tour.
I feel like we need t-shirts that list all the countries.
Oh, yeah.
They won't have dates necessarily, but, like all the countries. That'd be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I think that would be a big deal.
All right. I'm going to put that on my list. FYI, I've got a lot of things on my list.
We're officially pretty soon going to have some Fill in the Blank merch. That's what you're saying.
Oh, I got to put that on the list too.
All right. Well, good. Hey, well, listen, let's get on to the topic today. So we're going to talk Amazon, but not in the way that we've talked about Amazon in the past, because there was a new, they announced a new product, maybe, is that the way to say it? Product or
yeah, that's right.
So Amazon Echo Dot for kids. And this hit the news, well, it's just been a few days ago, right?
Right. It was late last week or so, maybe middle of last week. So after we recorded last week's show, Amazon released, announced its intention to release, it comes out in early May, the Amazon Echo Dot for kids. And so this is the same Echo Dot that you're used to seeing. It's the really small one that it's the size of a hockey puck, right? So it's the Echo Dot for kids, and it comes in these different colors, and it's a little bit more than the normal Echo Dot. But the hardware is not really what the big deal is. It's really the software and the services that are associated with this one that is specific for kids. So this is a pretty neat launch from Amazon, and it'll be up to parents to decide if this is something they're interested in with their kids. But if I kind of go down some of the list of features for this, I'll run down some bullet points here that I took from an article at The Verge. So you can set time limits, restrict which skills they can access. Or remember, Amazon or the Alexa has skills, not apps, but skills,
right,
that you have to install. And so some of those are going to not be age appropriate, depending on how old the person is that's using this. So it can restrict which skills they can access and restrict access to things like songs with explicit lyrics. Okay, so I'm with them so far. This is all good stuff for kids.
Yeah.
It will also allow you to turn off voice-activated purchasing. I don't know if you've read any of the articles over the years where kids have ordered just some crazy stuff via their Amazon Echo devices.
Yes.
So that's a good thing that will be turned off. You can also instruct Alexa, sorry if I'm setting, I need to say lady in the can. You can also instruct your lady in the can to respond to questions with more age-appropriate answers. So more context for questions asked instead of just giving only a direct answer. So that's pretty good. It explains it. It'd be like I explained when my daughter, who's 13, asked me a question. I explained, my answer to her is going to be different than the answer to my son, who is 7.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Okay,
Right?
gotcha.
So sometimes you need a little more context or a little better explanation for the younger one. And so it sounds like that's what they're going to do with this, which I think is a great idea. Here's a big one, voice calibration that will assume a younger, higher-pitched voice might be addressing the echo and also be more attuned for mispronunciations of Alexa. So I had to say it there. So imagine Alexa, right? Or something like that. That's a really big deal. And this is, I think this is, in my mind, is very basic stuff. But I don't know. I mean, Google doesn't do this, and Apple doesn't do this.
No, nobody's.
At least if they are doing this, they've not talked about it. They've not announced it.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's a very big deal. Now, here's the final one that they list here. A magic word, they're using their air quotes, a magic word that will provide positive feedback when kids address echo using please or other polite words and phrases. So I watched the video, and one of the examples they showed was, a child saying, "Lady in the can, please," and then, whatever he or she asked. And then so the lady in the can responded and gave him the answer and then said, "And thank you for asking so nicely."
Huh.
So, this is one of those things. I think we talked about this a while back when we were talking about just intelligent assistants in general and the concern that we're raising a generation of kids that just bark orders at a digital slave.
Right.
And so, how do you make sure that we're still teaching kids basic manners? Because if they grow up and they're using these things in their house and they're just barking these orders out at these little devices, and then they go out into the real world and try to talk to people like that, that's probably not going to be a good situation for them.
No, when they start treating the shopping clerk like Alexa,
Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, this is a pretty compelling list of features, in my opinion. And then they also integrated some free time options in there, which give you access to music and books. And there's a free version, and then there's the version you pay for. And of course, Amazon's all about, generating more revenue. And so that's a way for them to kind of sell you some services. And let's be honest, get your kids hooked on that stuff early and maybe beat Google and Apple to the punch. So, I mean, we know what the motives are here. But even if you don't subscribe to those other things, then I think this is a pretty good set of features, and I would like to see these really adopted across the board from Apple and Google. So what do you think about this Amazon Echo Dot for kids?
Well, I think it's pretty cool. So did you read anywhere say you have a Dot for kids, then does that mean that your Alexa in your home, so in your room, does it become adult only? So will it then ignore your kids and default it to its own Echo?
Well, I installed the Andrew Dice Clay skill on mine, so mine only responds to Andrew Dice Clay type language.
Well, that's great. Yeah. So what exactly do you call Alexa then?
I can't really say that because when I publish our show, I have to click the box that says this is a clean show.
Oh, right. Okay, all right. Hey, I'll tell you what I do like.
So no, I'm just kidding. I don't do anything different on any of mine. So it's not really adult only, but it doesn't have these restrictions on it for purchasing, which I've never bought anything through my Amazon Echo.
No, I haven't either.
So I don't have those. I don't have explicit music turned off because I don't ask it to play stuff that's generally got explicit lyrics, right?
Right.
So I don't really have any of those things turned on, but both of my kids have an Echo Dot in their rooms.
Okay.
We have them in there, and we weren't quite sure, like, is this a good idea? Is it not a good idea? But we had the the original Echo in our kitchen for a while, and for Christmas or Hanukkah, we're a commingled household around the holidays. So for one of those holidays, we got each of the kids the Echo Dot for their rooms. And the reason for that is really it's a way for them to listen to music without having a smartphone in their room or anything else, right? It's a way for them to set timers. And both of my kids, that's their alarm in the morning. That's who wakes them up. So you've got that. You've got basic answers while you're doing homework, which I've heard my daughter in there a lot, just asking, questions to the lady in the can, just about basic things, she's doing with her homework. And you do all of that. It really kind of opens up the world of a smartphone with all, so you have all the the content or access to things that you would get out of your smartphone without having that in their room. And I love it. It's also an intercom system now, right? Mm-hmm. So from the kitchen, I can call into one of their rooms or something like that. My son has this reminder that goes off at 7:25 every night to remind him to do something because he always forgets it.
Right.
And so every night his little Echo Dot reminds him to do something. So it's a really handy thing. And at the time they were like $40, right? When we bought them during the holidays. I think they normally sell for $50.
Okay.
So it's around $40. And I mean, that gives me a lot of bang for my buck for $40.
Oh, well, particularly when you think about if you were just going to buy an intercom system for your house, you'd pay something around there.
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like the Slate's title, Heather Schwedel from Slate. She wrote about it. The title to her article is Amazon's new Alexa for Kids will raise your child for you. That might be overstating it a little bit.
Sold.
Yeah, sold. So listen, you got
I'll
kids.
Take two.
Would you buy one of these? You think you would replace what you have already for them with one of these?
If I did not already have Echo Dots in both their rooms, I might buy one of these for my 7-year-old.
Okay.
But what I read in one of these, if you already have an Echo Dot, I believe that these features can be added to it because this is all done in software. Right? The hardware is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So in a sense, I'm going to be able to try this out. I think it's the first or second week in May that you'll be able to enhance, I guess, for lack of a better word, your existing Echo Dot and turn it into the kids version. So I'll probably try that on my sons and I'll see how it goes. But if I didn't already have them, you know what? I'd probably wait for one or two reviews, from sources that I trust. But I'd probably go for one of these. The only trick to this, or the only issue I see here, is this one's actually going to sell for a lot more money. It's going to sell for $30 more than just the regular Echo Dot.
Really?
It is. So now it comes with its little colorful color or cover, and I don't really know how to explain it, but it's like a little wrap thing that goes around it in these different colors, which I don't think that's that big of a deal, honestly. And I think for that extra money, you also get, you remember I mentioned their free time. Mm-hmm. You get a year free of that. Well, you're paying for it.
Okay.
So I think that comes with it as well. So I wouldn't get that if I don't upgrade to this. I don't really see a need to upgrade to it. But in general, I like this idea. And I would probably buy something like this if I didn't already have an Echo Dot.
Well, you talked about listening to a couple of reviews about it. For many, the fill in the blank is a review. So we'll let you, I'm looking forward to you downloading it, trying it out, and then maybe it being one of your future blank checks in the upcoming episode.
Yes. Stay tuned.
All right. Well, so that's the Amazon Echo Dot for kids. We will put a link or two in the show notes for you if you want to try that out.
Thanks for listening to the Fill in the Blank podcast. To support our show, go to patreon.com/FITB. Patreon allows you to support our show on your terms. You can contribute any amount that you want, so you get to decide how much our show is worth to you. A challenge for our listeners is to support us by contributing just $1 per month. That's only 3 cents per day. Your support helps us grow our audience and upgrade our audio equipment. Thanks for listening to the show and supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/FITB. patreon.com/FITB.
Well, and to follow that up, Keith, so there was also some other Alexa news that landed. TechCrunch had an article just last week about a new memory for Alexa, but really what it equates to is that Alexa will become more conversational. So I think the thrust of the article was saying that, so right now, every time you use Alexa, you've got to, hey, Alexa, and then you ask a question or give a command. And then if you're there and you want to do multiple things, every one of those is preceded by, hey, Alexa. And what this is saying is this is going to incorporate something of more of a natural conversation so that you can ask several things in a row and it be something more conversational. Siri kind of does this a little bit too.
Right. So this is a just natural progression of the intelligent assistant into more of a conversational interaction. And as a matter of fact, one of the biggest gripes I think that people have, whether they realize it and verbalize this or not, I certainly have this issue, is that you constantly have to say a trigger word, regardless of the service that you're using. So if you're using, Siri or Google or Lady in the Can from Amazon, you have to constantly say the trigger word followed by the specific phrase or question in order to get it to respond. And so oftentimes you just have to say those things one right after the other.
Right.
And it's just not natural. And I think that's a barrier for a lot of people to where maybe it just doesn't feel right talking like that because it's not how you talk. And so it might prevent people from using that. And this just makes sense. Now, you mentioned that Siri already does this. And, Siri has these features that demo very well. And a while back, they did a demo like this, where you ask a question and then you do a follow-up question. So, for example, you could say, who was the third president of the United States? And it answers, and then you could do a follow-up question. When was he born?
Yeah.
And it knows that you're talking about that person. And so this Lady in the Can update is very similar. And the example they give is, Lady in the Can, how is the weather in Seattle? And then she answers, or it answers. And then you can say, what about this weekend? And so it knows that you're still talking about Seattle weather, right? So that's the way that people talk. And then if you change the subject, and then it changes, it says you can even change the subject, saying, Lady in the Can, how's the weather in Portland? And then you follow up with, how long does it take to get there? And so now it knows I'm talking about Portland, not Seattle anymore.
So let me ask you this. So Siri does it a little bit. Alexa's going to be introducing it here pretty soon. Google Assistant, I don't use it as much as you do. Does it have that kind of conversational back and forth?
I believe it does.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that has been introduced or being introduced here, like the memory, and when we say memory, it is, say, the example they give here is, remember that Sean's birthday is June 20th.
Yeah.
And then so it will remember that for you and then surface that in some relevant way as that birthday gets near. And so the Google Assistant already does that. And I believe it already does some basic conversational things here because it's, really this isn't super complex stuff. I mean, it's not easy. None of this is easy. But when you consider what you're doing, all you're really saying is, I just need you to remember the previous answer and then tie these two things together. Right? So I ask a question, you give me an answer, and then the very next thing is going to be related to that first thing, right? So, conceptually, this is not hard to kind of think through. And, I'm going to oversimplify it by saying that, but really it's not that hard. And so for me, it's a little strange it took them this long to get here because in a lot of ways, Amazon has been out in front on their intelligent assistant and they caught Google and Apple off guard with the progress they were making. So this is just a natural, the next natural step so that this gets more conversational. And it says it's, coming soon to devices, in the US, UK, and Germany. I don't know when that will come. I'll tell you, I think the thing I'm most excited about this announcement, though, is the third thing. So they mentioned the memory and then the conversational skill. But the final part of this announcement was, in the weeks ahead, U.S. users will be able to launch skills using natural phrases instead of explicit commands. So we talked about skills a while back, and skills are the way that you add functionality to your Lady in the Can, right? So it's like the voice assistant version of an app. And so you can install, let's say, the Bank of America skill to where you can say, how much money do I have in my account, or pay this bill, or whatever, right? So, but you have to be explicit in triggering that. And so now it looks like they're going to allow these skills to be used without you having to explicitly install them. Let me give you an example from this article on TechCrunch. So it goes on, the example they give here says, Alexa, Lady in the Can, how do I remove an oil stain from my shirt? Okay, that's a fair question. I could totally see me asking that question to my Echo. And so it says, Lady in the Can responded by saying, here is Tide Stain Remover, which is the name of the Procter & Gamble skill that walks you through stain removal for over 200 specific stain types. So what I mean by this, prior to this update, you would have had to have installed that Tide Stain Remover skill. and then specifically called to your lady in the can and say, I guess access that or,
Right.
Get the Tide stain remover, whatever, and ask it this question. So by it being able to figure out that that's the right application to use or the right skill to use for your question, that to me is a lot more impressive than, just following up to how long does it take to get to Portland after I already asked you about the weather, right? This is a big deal.
It is. And what this does is that really unlocks the key to the motive there, because what they want ultimately is they want you spending more time talking to Alexa, because then they can go to Tide and it becomes premium advertisement. If in just a conversation with your lady in the can, something comes up that triggers one of these companies, then that's like an advertisement, popping up on your Google search or something like that. Here it is. It comes up. It's there. It's helpful. It'll provide it for you. But then Amazon turns around and it's like royalties on your conversation is essentially what it turns out to be.
Yeah. So this is actually pretty sneaky, which is really Amazon's MO. So they release a feature that is super convenient. It makes using this device much easier because there's over, I think, 40,000 skills.
Gosh.
And, come on, how are you going to remember those? And how do you're not going to know how to exactly ask every single one of them or to trigger each one of them. So it's got to start doing some of this work for you or you just won't use them.
Right.
And so for the user, you think, wow, thanks guys. This makes this device much easier for me to use. And I agree with that. But I'm with you. When I read this at first, I thought, wow, that's really handy. And I thought, that's a very specific example to a very well-known brand.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what on the back end that looks like if there's money changing hands so that when somebody asks about stains, that's a commercial.
It's
right?
a commercial.
It totally is a commercial. So I wonder, in this example, they use Tide. I wonder if Tide is paying for that.
Oh, absolutely Tide's paying. Amazon doesn't do anything for free.
Well, I guess my point is, so if I say, follow this through its natural conclusion. So the example they gave was, what was the question? How do I get this oil stain out of my shirt? Right?
Right.
And then the Tide skill answers the question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you don't have to say, ask the Tide skill or access Tide and tell me how to do this. So after it tells you, wasn't it just natural to say, would you like to order some of that?
Oh, absolutely. It's natural. Keith, what it's like product placement in your everyday life.
So do you remember last week I was telling you about The Attention Merchants, the book that I've been reading?
Yeah.
And so we talked about the introduction of advertising into radio programs in the 20s or 30s. That was unheard of because you're invading family time, right?
Right.
And so we had that discussion about how, the radio broadcasters figured out that their customer was the advertiser, not you. So the reason that the radio show was it kind of evolved and where soap operas originally began and things like that was what they were doing at the time was they were crafting shows that put you in optimal buying moods for whatever the products were that were sponsoring the show, right? So so the show that you listen to, if the soap opera is a really good example. And soap operas were primarily listened to by females, by women, and they're kind of afternoon shows, kind of like they are now for TV, but in radio form then. And so a lot of women didn't work, and so they were at home and they would listen to these shows. And so those shows were really designed to put them in a buying mood for whatever the products that were going to be advertised at the end of that show were.
Yeah,
it was super sneaky, and this feels like the exact same thing. Except they're not manipulating you on the front end because you're asking the question, how do I get, an oil stain off of my shirt? So you're initiating that. But now, obviously you're in the mood for, your brain is optimized for whatever, the solution is there. And boy, do we have a solution for you from Tide. And it can be there, in some cases the same day.
It can. So think about that. So they can now, in the not very distant future, with one of their, droids. Is it droid? Is that what you call it?
You mean they're drones?
They're drones. Let me go back.
Yes. Well, R2-D2 is going to roll up to your front door with a Tide pin.
C-3PO is going to show up. Well, in some cases now what they can do is they can, with their drone, they can have it to you that afternoon. So before the stain even sets in, they can have Tide at your door as the solution to your problem or whatever it is. It is absolutely, if you step back and think about it, brilliant on Amazon's part. They've been building all of the infrastructure to now be able to meet the need of the conversation you're having with Alexa. You don't even have to write it on your grocery list. It can be there before the afternoon's over.
Does that scare you a little bit? That kind of power that Amazon has, does that worry you?
Sure. Yes. How could that not worry you?
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I mean, the convenience is undeniable. I'm concerned about them being unchecked. This is where having some good competition would come in handy, and there's nobody that can compete with stuff like this right now.
So it reminds me, Keith, you remember that movie Wall-E you probably saw with your kids? And cartoon, and it's in this not too distant future, or very distant future, I don't know, depending on how pessimistic.
I remember the movie. I don't know that I ever saw that.
Yeah, well, so it starts out, it's worth watching, it's cute, but it starts out, and everything's automated. Everything's brought to you. These people, they don't exercise, they don't even move. They're in chairs, and everything's brought to them at a command by, conversation, and all their needs are met. And so it's this, I don't know, just reminded me of Wall-E. That's where we're headed.
Wow. How did that movie end? I mean, I think we're well past the spoiler zone, right? That movie's old. How did that movie end?
I don't remember how it ended. It ended with a great Disney song or something like that, Pixar song.
Okay.
That's how it
all
ended.
Right. Well, I'm sure that's how it'll end for us, too. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine. So that's Alexa gains new memory and automatically launches skills, or otherwise known as advertisements. Okay, so we kind of have a bonus third topic this week. We talked about Alexa for Kids. We've talked about what's coming up with Alexa as far as memory and automatically launching skills. But here's a topic to switch subjects, and that is what Ford has announced just in the last couple of days. And that is that they're going to stop selling sedans in North America. Can that be true? Keith, is that even true?
Well, it's true. The very first episode of the Fill in the Blank podcast was all about self-driving cars. And it was very much like doom and gloom for the car industry, according to car industry insiders.
Right.
So this isn't like brand new information, but it's gone from theoretical and like this will happen one day to, oh my goodness, it's happening. And so, that's a big shift mentally for me to say the company that invented the car, right,
is
kidding. No longer going to make
Ford
sedans. I mean, they're still going to sell vehicles, but their entire sedan lineup will be whittled down to two models. And it's the Mustang, which, is not a sedan.
Right.
But really what they mean is non-truck, right, or non-SUV.
Right.
So they'll make the Ford Mustang and then the Ford, I think what they called the Focus Active. Does that sound? Or Fiesta Active? There's one of their smaller cars. Sounds like maybe one of the little hatchback components, which are also really popular. But so they'll have those two vehicles, and then everything else will either be an SUV, truck, or crossover type device or type model. So yeah, the Ford is basically out of the sedan business. And several of the articles that I read said that GM's not going to be far behind them. So I feel like we're about to cross a major milestone in this transition to the next wave of whatever the automotive industry is going to look like in a few years.
Well, and it brings up two things in my mind. First is that if they make an announcement like this, I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, you're talking about stockholders, you're talking about board of directors. This is a decidedly different future for car makers in North America. And the other thing is, if the idea that the sedan's going away, but you're going to keep the truck, you're going to keep the SUV, the more of your vacation vehicles, this is really banking on there being a change in how North Americans will commute to work, how they're going to get along and get around in big cities. I mean, they've absolutely staked the future on all the statistics and data and futuring that everybody's been doing.
Yeah, and so you can. there's more than one factor that goes into this. There's a lot of things. And so if you look at the big ones, number one, Americans are buying more SUVs and trucks and crossovers than sedans, period. Right? I mean, so that's where Ford is making their money already. You know, the Ford truck is, arguably, the most iconic vehicle they have. And that's saying something because this is the company that owns the Mustang.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're making their money on trucks and SUVs. They also mentioned in almost every article I read, and it's really interesting when you read just kind of traditional news, most of them point to the kind of basic landscape of the automotive industry, and none of them focus on this being kind of one of the longer term consequences of ride sharing and, companies like Uber and Lyft and those types of things. So let me separate those two real quick. So on just the purely automotive side of it, then you've got Americans in particular that are driving more SUVs, crossovers, trucks, those types of things, and fewer sedans. You've also got really kind of continually declining fuel prices. To me, that's incredibly short-sighted. I would never change my entire automotive strategy based on fuel prices, but almost every article I read mentioned that, and that kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's Ford saying that, and that's maybe just journalists saying that, but that seems very short-sighted to me. And not to mention, I mean, the sedan space, I have to imagine, is owned by the Camry, the Accord, the Civic, the Japanese car companies. And or you've got the luxury models, whether it's, a Lexus or a Mercedes or BMW. I feel like there's no room for Ford sedans or even GM sedans, minus maybe some Cadillacs. It just seems like, that's a really crowded space already.
Yeah.
And the Toyota Camry, for example, isn't that the most popular sedan in America? Like year after year after year.
It is.
And like just it's sales wise, right? They sell those things like crazy.
And they stay on the road for so long.
They do. So, a big part of what they're doing is just basic kind of market principles where this is just not a product that we're good at selling. So that's one part. However, the other part to this equation was what I was mentioning earlier, where there's two parts to this. The second part is the fact that you've got a completely different landscape on the horizon. And so let me read just a snippet from the Engadget article that we'll put into the show notes.
Okay.
It says there's also a matter of overall declining car ownership. Even if you discount changing tastes and economic situations, there just isn't as much reason to own a car as there once was. You can order many products online instead of visiting the store, and ride sharing can frequently cover quick trips. That's even before self-driving cars arrive too. Why pour so much money into sedans when many people might hop into robotic cars? To me, when I heard this news, my mind went straight to this topic.
Yeah.
Not the part where, Ford probably just doesn't sell a whole lot of Fusions and Tauruses. So, I'm sure it's a combination of all of these things, but this is really big news, but it's not surprising news.
No, it's not. Well, and they cite another article that they highlight CEO of Ford, Mark Fields. And what he said is that, and this is surprising to me. I know it doesn't surprise you. It surprises me. He says, when you think about this, half of the world's population lives in cities. And he said that his view, and several others in the industry, they share it, that the next 15 years could literally be 2/3 of the population living in cities. So this, this incredible urbanization that's taking place. And he says, listen, there's not going to be the infrastructure to support everybody owning a car.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've said that many times.
Yep.
So do you remember, we've had I think we've had the self-driving car discussion at least twice, like formally on our show.
We have, and you're the guy that said 10 years from now.
So we should have put a wager down on that.
We should have put a wager. That's right. Well,
so it sounds like Mark, the CEO at Ford here, has been listening to the show because he clearly agrees with me.
He clearly does, but he's not going to quit making trucks, which is the only thing I said the thing I'd want to hang on to.
So you know what? Okay, so real quick on the truck.
Yeah.
The articles that I'm reading mention that they are moving very quickly towards the electrification of the upper end of their lineup, meaning electrifying their trucks, SUVs, and even Mustangs. So I'm curious how that's going to go over because I just imagine, the typical truck buyer, and I don't want to stereotype people, but, trucks are about power and towing and the ability, just loading up a bunch of stuff. I mean, they're workhorses, right? I mean, trucks are very just practical vehicles, and there's a reason that people need to drive trucks. On the other hand, I think of just the typical electric car owner,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not the truck buyer in my mind. So I'm curious how they get from where we are now with the attitudes on electric vehicles, which, for me, I'm great with an electric vehicle all day long. But, the average truck buyer is not, right now thinking, what would make this truck better? If it was all electric.
No,
you know what I mean?
They're not thinking that. I'm not
seems
thinking
like there's
that.
This massive divide between those two types of consumers, and Ford's planning on bridging that gap in like very little time.
Right.
So I'm really curious how they plan on doing that.
Could be with nuclear power. Could be nuclear powered engines. Guys would buy that. I'm telling you. Truck guys would buy, plutonium in your engine. They would go for that. But short of that, I'm not seeing any truck owner trying to drive into the, Whole Foods and look for a place to plug it in. I'm just telling you, that's not going to happen.
I agree with you. I don't know. We'll see. Well, I mean, we've talked about Elon's Tesla 18-wheelers. So, I mean, if you've got enough power to push one of those things down the road, I don't know why an F-150 is any different.
All right. Well, so that's Ford. Stop selling sedans. So if you want a Taurus, now's the time to get it. All right, Keith. Well, it's that time. What's your blank check this week?
I've been using this forever, and I'm a fan of it. I use it across all my devices and even on the desktop, but I've never really shared it with the fill-in-the-blank crowd here. Not that this is like a big secret or anything, but it's Google Photos. Do you ever use Google Photos?
Well, I have Google Photos, and I think sometime I set up that when I take a picture, it gets uploaded to Google Photos, but I don't know where I turned that on. But when I go check my Google Photos, it looks like every picture I've ever taken's in there. So I don't use it. I probably should use it. I'm sure the interface is fantastic, but I just don't.
So Google Photos has been around for a long time, and every year they keep iterating this thing, and it's got some really cool features. So the primary reason I started using Google Photos way back when was the fact that it gave me another copy of all of my photos. So I use an iPhone mostly, and so almost all of my photos over the last however many years have been taken with an iPhone. And so all of those pictures are backed up, in iCloud. I pay for, my iCloud storage. So all those photos are on my Mac, they're on my iPhone, they're on my iPad, right? And that's really convenient.
Yeah.
But I do have this kind of paranoia that, if something happens in the Apple world, what happens to all those photos, right? So, I mean, it's kind of, there's a single point of failure there, and that concerns me a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I turned on Google Photos, and so it does the same thing. So I've got 2 complete photo libraries in separate places. And I don't have to do any syncing at all. It just does it all. So Google manages all of my photos for me on the Google end of it, just like Apple does on the Apple end of it.
Okay.
So just from a pure kind of redundant backup standpoint, it's very useful. And by the way, it's like all Google stuff. They don't charge you anything to use this. So I've got all of my photos double backed up, one with Apple, one with Google.
So how's the interface? Does it have like the facial recognition and those kinds of things? I mean, are your photos easy to search from there?
They are very easy to search. And actually, Google was way out in front on this, of course, because this is just right in Google's wheelhouse compared to Apple. So you have an iPhone app. So you have an Android app, you have an iPhone app, there's a web interface, there's an iPad app. So you can access your Google Photos from basically any device, which is really neat. And the interface looks about the same across all of those devices. So if you're used to using it on one device, then you can use it anywhere. So that's pretty handy.
Yeah.
So at the very top of your Google Photos, I'm looking at the web version right now, there's a search box, and you can search for whatever. So if I just searched in, so it gives an example of searching for a particular park because it knows I've been there. And so I can just type in there and it, that park name, and it will just show me pictures from there. I'm going to type in, just give me a random topic to type in here, and let me see.
Okay. What I can come up with. How about a sports game? Have you gone to a sports game or something like that?
I'm going to type in baseball.
Okay, baseball.
So when I typed in baseball, I have several albums in here. And so it's Logan's first baseball game. So my son Logan, his very first baseball game, it's got an album with pictures there. It's got some other pictures from various games. It's got pictures of us in the stands at a baseball game. It's got pictures of my son wearing a shirt with a baseball on it.
No way.
It's got pictures of when my wife and I were in San Diego not that long ago. We went to a Padres game. It's got pictures of the stadium there. It's got pictures of me at another ballpark with some friends.
Did it pull up any like security footage of when you walked into a park that you didn't take, but the ballpark did?
Well, not yet. I haven't scrolled all the way down yet. It's got pictures of my son playing t-ball. It's got pictures of my son holding up a game ball from the game that he won, both at the field and at our house.
Keith, how does it know that?
Well, it's googly. And I'm scrolling back years, and it's got all kinds of baseball photos. So my son played baseball, t-ball and, various forms of, really small kid baseball. I mean, it's got every single picture from all of that, from all those seasons. It's got a ton. So this is better than any other photo service that I'm aware of.
I'll bet most people have no idea that Google Photos can do that.
Probably not. You can search by location, which is pretty common. You can search by face. So it auto kind of groups faces together. So when I'm looking in the search feature here, I've got my face, my kids, my wife, parents, cousins, all this kind of stuff. And you can just click on one of those, and of course it will show you all the pictures associated with that face. And I find that Google normally finds these things better than Apple does, because again, this is kind of what Google does, right? So it really, it's a very cool service. I'm not terribly concerned about Google doing anything crazy with all of this data, and I like the backup feature that it gives me. But it also has some cool features. It has this Google Assistant feature that's built in as well. So have you ever taken like 5 or 6 pictures in a row of something?
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so, so you have these 5 or 6 pictures in your camera roll. It will take a picture like that and make an animation for you without you having to do it. So it just does it. So there's a little section that just says assistant, and it has all these little recommended things that it does with your photos. So it will make little collages of your photos from a particular day, and it will say, oh, we put these photos together. We think they all go together. And it makes you a nice little kind of collage. It has memories, just like, your Apple Photos does now, or, Facebook does these memories for you and things like that. It's a really neat little assistant that it has. It will automatically stylize some of your photos. It will say, hey, I took this picture and, blew out the color and changed the contrast and did this. What do you think? Do you like it? And it doesn't permanently change those pictures. It just gives you recommendations, and it does a lot of this stuff for you. So it's an awesome service. It's completely free. It's a good way to back up all of your photos, and it's a great way to find and sort through all of your photos as well. It has a lot of other features that I don't have time to talk about, but I've been using this for years, and I highly recommend it. Google Photos.
Hey, that's a great blank check. I can't wait to go check that out. Well, this week for me, I'll tell you, it's and it's kind of funny. It's Robinhood investment app. Have you ever heard of this?
I have not, but I'm curious. Go ahead.
Well, okay. So I don't know if you use an investment app on your phone, like an E-Trade or something like that, but I'll tell you how I found out about it. My son recently turned 18 years old, and one of the first things he did was I get a text that says, hey, Dad, what's my social security number? I'm like, what in the heck are you signing up for? Well, he's downloaded this Robinhood investment app, and it is a fantastic app for the first-time investor. And I'll tell you why it says this. So if you can read several reviews about it. It's highly reviewed. Forbes did a deal, said 7 top investment apps, and I think Robinhood was number 4. But one of the summaries says this: these days, and the whole thing about it is that it's free trades. So it doesn't cost you anything. They make money off of interest that sits in your account, but it's not necessarily money that you miss or anything. So here's how it says: these days, free often means that the extra fees are buried deep where you can't find them, or at least not until they show up as a surprise addition to your account statement. Robinhood is refreshing because the service is truly free. You can trade without spending a dime in fees or commissions, and there's no hidden costs. So a few things they don't have. They don't have trading tools. They don't have very good research or education or, help you with a broad range of investment options. But you can find those in other places. And so if you are a first-time investor, or you thought, man, I'd really like to buy some stock, and I don't know how to do that, or I don't want to call a brokerage firm, or I don't want to pay $65 on E-Trade, or I don't have $5,000 to keep as a minimum, all of those things, all those obstacles are eliminated with Robinhood. It allows you to go right in there and you can begin investing from day one.
Nice. Okay, so when you said the name of it, and it's an investment app, I'm like, okay. Well, you said your son, investment app. It's titled
Yes.
Robinhood.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, okay, your son's going to steal from you and give to himself because, like, that's the rich to the poor, right? I was trying to figure out where this was going.
Yes.
Okay. So how does he like it?
Well, he likes it. I mean, so he hasn't been on it for very long.
Okay. Here's the question I really should ask.
Yes.
Since he did this, has he called you and asked to borrow money?
He hasn't asked to borrow any money. So he had some money, had some birthday money, turned around, put it all in there. And I think as of the last telling, he's made something like $4.80 or something like that. So, if nothing else, it empowers the regular person to begin investing in small ways, over long periods of time if they want to do that. And it is totally a legitimate investing app. So there are several of those that are out there. There's one called Acorn that you hook up to your bank account, and then what it does is it rounds up your purchases. So if you go to Starbucks and you spend, $3.58, it'll round that up to $4. It'll take the rest of that change and it'll turn around and invest it. So you're not really missing it. It's just coming out at pennies and nickels and quarters out of your account. And so that's one way to do it. This is actually something that's a little more hands-on, gives you total control. You buy the stocks you want to. You can watch them as they go. You can sell them when you want to. So it's interesting. I think it's a fascinating concept, and the guys that have put it together have figured out a way to make money doing that the same way. Yep. So Robinhood, that's my blank check for the week. Thanks for listening to Fill in the Blank, where we discuss how the technology of today impacts the world of tomorrow. We'll be back next week with another episode, and in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter at AskFITB or email us at fitbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show, and if you like the show, tell your friends. And please rate us and review us on iTunes or from wherever it is that you're listening to the podcast. And remember the Fill in the Blank $1 challenge. Your support goes a long way. We'll see you again next week here at Fill in the Blank.